Welcome to the Brohoyo podcast, the podcast about Gacha in general and Hoyoverse games in specific. I'm your host, Steven, and this is my co host, David.
Hey, y'all.
This week, we're going to discuss why we keep playing Gacha games and our drives and motivations for continuing to play Gacha games, other than the obvious one, which is, of course, a sunk cost fallacy. But, David, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, the most obvious one, I think, like you mentioned, is the sunk cost fallacy. So we're not going to dive too deep in that, but that can mean either monetarily or time-wise as well. I think it's part of the reason I think I still have Epic 7 on my phone as a day one player for that game. But as far as other motivations as to why we stick around and play gacha games, I was just joking with a buddy the other night, like, why do I continue to queue up for a game of Teamfight Tactics, or why am I playing some of these gacha games when I have a plethora of AAA games available to me, whether it be through Steam or whether it be through the Microsoft Xbox PC Game Pass. I still find myself spending some time playing these gacha games. And for me, some of those things are the simplicity of being able to just pick up and play whenever. You have a set amount of time, essentially, or a goal in mind every day to play. It's, I'm going to do my dailies. And then that is a finite endpoint to like check that box for the day. Whereas maybe with a AAA game, we fall into the old gamer habit of just one more quest, and just one more level, just one more stage type thing. So maybe it puts a little bit of control on you in that regards, or also for some games that are stamina based, it's a forced limit in terms of how much you can actually play for those gacha games that are stamina based. So I think those are like the initial things that kind of get me going in that. But what are maybe some initial thoughts for you, Steve, as far as why do you find yourself playing gacha games continually?
Honest answer is that I really, in some ways, don't play gacha games consistently over a long period of time. I'm very much so someone who will pick up and put down different gacha games as I am in the mood, as can be seen with Nikkei. I have a tendency to pick it up, put it down, pick it up, put it down. I don't consistently play it for more than usually a month or two at a time. The big exception to that is the Hoyoverse games, Genshin, Honkai Star Rail. Those are two that I've stuck with for a much longer period of time consistently, instead of my usual hopping around, skipping around style of play. And in some ways, I'm the opposite of you, in that I find what frustrates me with gacha games tends to be the limited log on every day type events, the daily grind type stuff. Really doesn't do a great job of engaging me. I much prefer the big story the big story dumps that we get for Genshin and Honkai, the bigger events that you have going on. Again, with Nikkei, I tend to pop in for specific events and then jump out, more so than staying and playing just continually. So for me, it's more, this discussion is going to be a lot more about, okay, what gets me to stay playing for more than whatever your trial period is or your starter period is, more so than maybe what keeps me playing for 6 months to a year.
And that is true. That is a good way to break it down, right? What keeps me playing beyond that honeymoon phase? Because every gacha game that comes out, when you log in and you try it for the first time, whether you are a day one player or rather you jump on the wagon maybe a little bit after it's come out, there's usually some type of catch-up rewards for those type of things. But if you're a day one player, especially during that launch week, there's usually a lot of goodies that come out, a lot of free pulls that come with that. We've talked about re-rolling in the past and how maybe difficult or easy some gachas make it, but ultimately there is that honeymoon phase, and it's once that novelty wears off, does the game still hold that shine to you that lets you keep playing it? And I know somebody had a comment on one of our videos that we did in the past. They were talking about, I think they were referencing Nikkei, and had talked about how many people are actually playing this for the plot type thing. And ironically, that is one of the few gachas that's plot I actually follow. Similar to what you said with Genshin and Star Rail for playing in terms of long sitting session, like gaming periods itself, to sit down and play. Those stories, obviously, I'm going to follow and I'm invested in. I want to see where they go. But from a lot of my gachas, it's not the story. It's not story related. But ironically, Nikkei is one of the exceptions to that because of at its surface level, and you see what type of game it is. People are like, obviously that's why people play it. But there's story and personality behind it. I would make the case for, and I think that's a big part of keeping me coming back to some of these gotchas is because we are invested in the story. And with something like Hoyoverse in their games, the main story quests, they don't it's not something they're rolling out super duper quickly. It's expanded out over 6-8 week period, or sometimes even longer than that, right? Sometimes we get little filler story arcs before another Archon quest. But for me, I think that's a big driving factor. Is your story compelling, and is it something that sucks you in with likable characters, or you want to see where it's going, maybe?
Yeah, and I do think that for a majority of players, story is a non-zero factor for why they continue to play gotcha games. You can kind of look to the fact that when Genshin's numbers, especially the first few years before Honkai came out, but you would see whenever they dropped a major patch, a X.0, X.1, X.2 patch where there was big story reveals, there was news. The new zones help, but there's new story reveals, there's new characters showing up. You saw a spike in activity, you saw interest increase. There's a reason why the period between roughly April to August is considered the dead period, even after the Apple Archipelago or the Summer Zone is released. That's much more of an anomaly than during those periods of times. People aren't playing Genshin, they walk away. And then they come back for the big story releases. And I'm fairly certain, I don't have the numbers again, but I'm fairly certain it's kind of similar for Honkai, where when Connie, most recent zone, comes out or came out, you saw a spike of interest again in the game. So yeah, I would say story definitely is a factor in what motivates people to play games and what motivates us to play them. I would also say that there needs to be a core gameplay loop that exists that isn't just pulling for characters. And by that I mean that you need to have something else to the game that isn't just, for example, auto battling. If the entire set of gameplay is you pull for a character, you put a character into a character slot, and then the game just plays itself from there, that for me is really not going to give your game any legs. It's not going to keep me interested any more beyond the pure casino elements of, okay, I get to pull for new characters, or I get to try and get this new character. And once you hit the regular grind of the gacha, out of that honeymoon period, out of that starter period, there's really nothing in there to hook me or to keep me hooked to that game. I would say maybe if we're doing breakdowns, 30% gameplay or 30% story, and let's go with 20 to 40% gameplay, because we got other topics to cover here, but that'd be my percentage breakdowns for what we're covering so far.
Yeah. And I think too, now there's an element of autoplay that I can appreciate, like if you splash it in there with the option, because sometimes there are those days where it's just like, yeah, let me just get through this as quickly as possible, or I'm distracted doing other things. So let me just pop this on autoplay, farm whatever I need to farm, and check those daily boxes. I think another factor too, aside from the story and the characters. Now, you mentioned a little bit the casino aspect. I think that little bug is in that dopamine hit is in all of us that play gotchas. We like the highs that ultimately come with hitting that 5-star early whenever that happens, or getting the shiny new toy, the shiny new character that you want, right? There is that aspect of it. But I think another reason that maybe comes to why we keep playing gotchas is accessibility. And with accessibility, and this is on two fronts in terms of accessibility. This is not only the monetary accessibility, because a lot of gotcha games are free. So there's no gatekeeping in terms of trying out the game, right? There's nothing keeping you from at least trying it out, seeing if you like it, and then sticking with it. And then if you so choose, supporting the developers by buying a pack or whatever have you. But also in terms of accessibility, in terms of how you can play it. So a lot of these games, the idea and the concept is, right, it's a mobile based game, right? So you have the accessibility. If you commute to work and you're on like the bus, or you're on the train, or whatever it is, that's just boom, you can just have it out, be on your phone, whereas you can't do that with a AAA console game. And then also now with the evolution of kind of, I think, the gaming audience, a lot of these gacha games, like taking Hoyoverse as an example, that have the PC client. So you have the availability to do it on the go, and you also have the availability to do it on that nice PC gaming rig that you have, and the game looks really pretty and so much grander on a PC. And so that is another accessibility thing, whereas that gaming console, most of them aren't designed to be taken with you on the go. You can make an argument the Switch can go somewhere, but the Xbox you're not taking on the road typically, and gaming on a quick session on the way to work or whatever it may be.
Yeah, I can see that. I'll admit, for me personally, and I've said this before in the past, is that one of the big things I look for is a PC client. I'm really not necessarily a giant fan of using my phone as a gaming tool anymore. I will admit, in the past, I was a little bit more open to it, but as time has gone on, I really am not interested in using it as a gaming aid, as it were, or a gaming console. I will also say that, and it's come up a little bit in this conversation, but the daily aspect can be one that is a little bit frustrating for me. We had an entire episode on dailies a while back. That was, I believe, episode 6 was when we talked about dailies. But I feel like the only reason why a lot of gotcha games are able to get away with requiring dailies to the extent that they do is because they're like, oh, if you're on vacation, you can still take your phone with you and play. But that sort of requirement, that feeling of FOMO or falling behind, can also wear away at my motivation to play a game. Where if I know that because I haven't logged in and done dailies and etc., I'm off of my rotation, off of my loop of getting resources in order to get pools and so on and so forth, that can really demotivate me from continuing to play a game. There's been a number that I've dropped due to just, hey, I went on vacation for a week, and when I came back, I was at a point where it's almost better for me to wait long enough for them to give me the comeback bonus rather than trying to play catch up. At least in my own head. Usually that's not the case. Like, just buy the number. Playing will get you
The daily
more.
play is usually
Yeah.
the best play, but yeah, I hear what you're saying. And to clarify, we talk about the dailies in episode 5. So if you guys are interested in talking about the daily gameplay loop, jump back, check out our 5th episode, and then along the same lines, the pool economy was episode 6. Yeah,
No. Yes, you are correct. You are correct. I had that wrong. Apologies.
yeah. As far as the gotchas go, though, and I want to jump back to this accessibility, especially with stuff that we're seeing happen with AAA games that have come out recently. So we talk about accessibility. So growing up, games were maybe $50 or so when they came out. Man, I remember getting Super Nintendo games and it was like $50 and thinking, man, this blows my mind. And it's just the evolution of technology to what we have now in terms of graphics and game is absolutely amazing. To then go back and look at some of those NES models and polygons. But anyway, the point that I'm getting at there is we have that $50-$60 threshold, right? And now we're starting to see some of these AAA games get a little bit more expensive. We're starting to see $70 price tags. And then this isn't even getting into the discussion of, then you talk about different types of editions. You have like that basic edition is that $60-$70. Then you have the limited edition or the director's or whatever, that collector's edition, which could be $80 and then $100 or $120. And some of those, like, it gives you maybe some cosmetics or some extra fun things like that. Others, it's something like, oh, you get early access 3 days before the game officially launches to start playing. And so we're seeing that be a feature more and more of paying more for a AAA game. But now, even with things like Dragon's Dogma 2 that just came out, you see even microtransactions working their way into single player games. Microtransactions aren't unique in AAA games in the past. We've seen that for years and decades, and things like FIFA is notorious, or Madden, things like that. But in a single player exclusive game like Dragon's Dogma 2, to have microtransactions, it's a trend I think we may be starting to see more and more of. And so they're instilling that FOMO, or you're missing out on the skin or this whatever it is that they're offering in there, but they're still gatekeeping you at the front end with $70, and that can end up being a big commitment. Or even battle passes within single player games, just like what are we doing?
Mm.
Whereas again with gachas, you don't have that initial gatekeeping entry fee. It's like, hey, come in, try it out. You're not obligated to pay any money. You can play it for free as long as you want. Just again, we've set expectations of the being a whale versus being a free to play back in episode 3. But if you want to, you can at that point once you've tried it out and said, hey, I'm going to be spending time playing this game. I'd like to support the developers. I'd like to see more of this content. I'd like to progress maybe a little bit faster. And so I think that's also part of what keeps me coming back to gachas as well, is that I read about one on Reddit or somebody suggests one to me that's coming out. And I can try it out. There's no harm in that. I always love these articles or these threads in Reddit that are like, hey, this game's coming out. Should I try it? Yeah, it's free. Try it. If you like it, cool. If you don't, no harm, no foul. You lost an afternoon of gaming.
Yeah. And again, free is difficult to argue with as far as both trying things out and as a benefit. I will say, just because we've created the dichotomy here, I do think that the price tag that you do pay for AAA games can be worth it, because let's be blunt, a lot of gacha games are very light on the actual game. As I mentioned earlier, the actual gameplay isn't necessarily there. So I can understand why a number of players, myself included, sometimes go, hey, is it worth playing this? Really, sometimes that question isn't, it's free, why not give it a shot? It's more of like, okay, is there anything here that's worth the time I'm spending? Because unlike money, I can't get more time other than through healthy eating and exercise. I'm not really going to be able to get that back. So do I want to spend an afternoon trying it out, or can you give me an elevator pitch that will maybe make it so that it's worth that even small investment? Again, I do think a lot of the motivations that keep people playing gacha games does come down to gameplay. Or I do think gameplay is a non-zero element, and that just the slim pickings in the gacha market is one of the things that makes it, and mobile gaming in general, I think, a tough sell to a lot of the hardcore crowd. I think it's the reason why Hoyoverse has, or yeah, it is Hoyoverse now. Sorry, they keep on changing their name, and even though I say it every week, I keep on wanting to say MiHoYo. Anyways, the reason why Hoyoverse games do so well, I think, is because they don't fall back onto the menu-based setup that a lot of gacha games have. That if you're playing the majority of gacha games, you're essentially going through menus over and over again. Whereas even the little bit of moving the characters around in Nikke is vastly better than what you'll get in the vast majority of gacha games, where it'll be, okay, go to this menu, choose this mission from the menu. Okay, you're dropped into the combat system. You play that for maybe 30 seconds if you don't just auto battle or have skip tokens to let you skip through it. Okay, now you're back in this menu. And a lot of times those menus are also just disguised menus where it's, okay, you've got a desktop basically that you're going through, and then everything beyond that desktop is just more sub-menus. And I'm an old JRPG fan. I have no problem with menu-based combat. Menu-based gameplay doesn't necessarily bother me a whole lot, but when it's the only thing on the market, or the vast majority of what you on the market, I do think that that can be draining. That really saps my willingness to continue to play a game when the only thing I'm doing is going through menus.
And that's a good point. And you raised a good notion there too about the AAA games, about how when you are ultimately paying that $70 for a AAA game, yeah, there usually is a more well drawn out game behind that, right? The progression and everything about it, the things that go into it, typically speaking, right?
Obviously, there are caveats.
Yeah, there, of course, there's exceptions to every rules, right? But in general speaking, and then the flip side of that is with the gachas on the free side, you do get some real bad ones that are out there, and similar to what you're talking about in terms of just going through menus, sometimes you get a lot of copy and pasted gacha type games, and it cracks me up every time I see a gacha game. And I'm like, man, the assets from this game look very similar to a different game. Then you come to find out that first game got shut down, and they're quite literally reusing it, rebranding it under a slightly different title. But it's like the same production team, it's the
Mm-hmm.
same developer, and everything like that. And they're literally just trying to spin it as if it's this brand new game, but it's quite literally exactly what was and then got shut down. So they're looking for that little cash grab, right? So I'm not trying to say, like I said, that one is necessarily the other better than the other. I too have also I still enjoy and play AAA games. I'm just more making the statement of I think I look at how many AAA games I guess I'm playing versus how many Gacha games I currently go through. And it's like if I really look at how many AAA games I'm playing, I I can maybe count on one hand how many I'm currently very casually going through, as opposed to with gachas over the course of the day. I think let's see, I can count them out real quick. That's one, two, three, four, five, six, seven. I think that I touch on a given day, and like you mentioned earlier, it's like you have that routine. So whereas okay, during my lunch break, I'm gonna knock out my dailies in this game, and then during work, I may be on my phone, have something auto playing to grind out for gear and artifacts in whatever game I'm playing. And then once the servers reset at 7 o'clock for another game, because 7 o'clock here is midnight over in Asia where the servers reset, then I'm playing that at 7 o'clock type of day. So I agree in terms of, and I think that even proves the point of because I can count, maybe 3 AAA games I'm playing versus 7 Gacha games I'm playing, that those 3 AAA games have a little bit more in-depth gaming
Mm-hmm.
mechanics and loop than the Gacha game does. Again, being exceptions, I would say Genshin has if you're driving story and stuff, it can be on par with AAA in that regards. But if you're just logging in, doing your commissions, burning your res, and getting out, then you're reducing it to a basic gotcha game. But yeah, so that's where I think on that front.
Again, looping back to the overall what keeps you playing, how much does we've talked about story, but how much does character, that's an awkward sentence, in what way do characters and character designs and so forth, the aesthetic style, let's go with, of the game and the characters keep you interested in the game or keep you moving forward in a given gotcha game?
Ooh, that is a good question because yeah, aesthetics. I know for me, in terms of how the characters look, what kind of is it a steampunk thing? Is it a fantasy? Is it post-apocalyptic? What kind of story is it bringing us in terms of that aesthetic? But I guess to give an example, play that out and flesh that out from my personal tastes. Now, in the Gacha community, Raid Shadow Legends is a huge joke for their advertising campaigns because they're absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I've tried out Raid Shadow Legends in the past. I played it. I don't even think I made it through a month. It was back, I think, actually when they did a collaboration with Ninja. So like all the new players got like, the Ninja character that was based on him. Which, if actually, I think I was reading an article. Did I read that right? That he has cancer. So hope all the best to him if he was diagnosed. I think a big streamer was, and I think it was him. So if that's the case, best of luck to him. Wishes. But to the point, I tried it out. And the mechanics of Raid Shadow Legends are very similar to Summoner's War, very similar to Epic 7, very similar to Outer Plane. So it's your class of 4 parties, turn-based wave killer, essentially, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it just didn't stick for me. Raid Shadow Legends, it's a more realistic, fantastical 3D character models, but it just didn't stick to me. But a game like Epic 7 has stuck with me, even though it's the same eventually gameplay loop. They have the same premise, the same game modes, excuse me. But the aesthetic in Epic 7 is a little bit more of an anime aesthetic. And so that kind of resonates with me a little bit more. And then obviously Genshin and Star Rail have that same kind of anime aesthetic, and their characters are also very much. I think the characters are a big part of the game. Like
Mm-hmm.
the character side quests, the effort that goes into the hangouts clearly shows that it's Genshin and Hoyoverse. In Star Rail, they don't want you to just view the characters necessarily as pixels, but as living, breathing parts of the world. And I think that helps their case, and it's definitely a big appeal to why I know I've stuck around with Genshin and am sticking around with Star Rail, and I'm willing to try out Zenless Zero, just because I think they do a good job fleshing out their characters. But what about you? What are maybe some aesthetics have deterred you from a gotcha game, or maybe some aesthetics have inspired you to continue with the gotcha game that you maybe didn't love at first?
One that definitely deters me is the chibi 3D model style, where typically when you're pulling for the character, you get a very nice detailed JPEG, and then as soon as you take them into combat or try and do anything with them outside of just looking at them on the character screen, they become a little 3DS Pokemon style chibi avatar. That
So, Princess Connect, Blue Archive, Azure Lane type thing, like that dynamic change.
That or Echo Apocalypse is one that we've
Okay,
referenced before.
yes,
That
a
one
more
has a
recent one,
similar,
yeah.
yeah, that style. If you're going to have you pull for a character, I would like the character to remain somewhat consistent across all the different forms that they come in. Again, going back to Genshin and Hoyo, verse when you get the nice pretty splash art for the character, but that character looks that way in game. They are not, here's this pretty splash art, okay, here's a very cheap 3D render. I want to see that primarily. I don't necessarily have a problem with like flat 2D style characters. I actually have a larger issue on games trying to do 3D models, but again, trying to do it cheaply. Earlier in this conversation, we talked about, hey, a lot of gotcha games are free for you to access. Doesn't mean that they don't make money, but a lot of times the investment in them is very low. And I've run across a lot of gotcha games where the in battle character sprite just looks cheap, even if they're not in that chibi style. So again, I'm looking for quality there. I don't mind sticking with a 2D flat style as long as it looks like there's been work and effort put into it. Other than that, as far as like general trends, I tend to prefer the more fantasy and fantastic looks for characters versus a more grounded style. Again, your Raid Shadow Legends, your Summoner War style tends to leave me going, not overly interested. I'd prefer the more anime, the more fantastical style of character. Not that, again, I wouldn't have a problem with it. I think Limbus Company is the name of the game. Might be
Hmm.
wrong.
Yeah.
I actually didn't have a problem with that style. My biggest issue was the fact that you don't really get multiple characters, you just get variations on the same set of characters. So they had a very slim roster that they more release skins with different stat styles than they do full characters. So I think if they had done if it had been more character based, then instead of just doing tweaks on current characters, they'd actually created full new roles for them. I might have stuck with that a little bit more, but that game has its own set of issues that we're not going to go into.
Yeah, I think we touched on that back closer to its release a few weeks or months maybe ago at this point.
Yeah.
But has there been, so you talked about the chibi art style, and I know that that can be very polarizing in terms of the fandom in gacha games. With chibi modeled games, has there been a chibi modeled game that maybe you've kept playing because there was something that you enjoyed about it, or something that you were able to like, get over the chibi aspect?
Uh,
Or has it all been like, tried them, really can't get into it, it's a killer for me, I'm out?
Closest I can say is Nikkei, and that's mainly because you only have it on the quote unquote world map, campaign map style
Hmm.
section. And then when you get into combat, the character matches the character art. So the chibi aesthetic is more for just overworld
It
movement.
is worth noting for Nikkei, for their April Fools, they did it last year and they brought it back this year. When you go into combat, last year during April Fools, it was a shock to everybody. You were that chibi art, and it threw everybody for a loop. There were some people thinking it was bugged, some people hated it, some people were like, make it a toggleable option, if toggleable is a word. But then they brought it back again this year with the option to turn it on or off on the actual day itself, and so it was pretty humorous. They do a good job with April Fools.
Yeah, and again, that's a great way to use that. But in general, I would probably have been one of those people going, if you don't fix this, I'm dropping this game.
I hear you,
The
and
situation.
while chibi art style, it's not my favorite. I will overlook it if your gameplay is fun or simple enough. So like, for because Blue Archive is like this,
Yeah.
and I'm giving been giving that a fair try because it's a silly, lighthearted little game, and the gameplay is yeah, it's unique. It's a unique gameplay style. Yes, it kind of auto plays itself, and you choose when to use the skills, but it's not turn based per se. It's an open field, as it were. But there was, I guess, Princess Connect was probably one that was a chibi art that I played for a while before Crunchyroll shut that down on the US side for whatever reason. But I guess those would be the ones that would most recently come to mind. Technically, Azure Lane is chibi when you're in combat, and very much not chibi when you're not in combat, which is how it makes all its revenue. Those are the only ones that come to mind.
Yeah, I really can't come up with one that has a chibi art style in combat and does not out of combat. And the reason why I say that is because Disgaea, it technically in that one you had a sort of like semi chibi, but it matches the style of the actual game itself. So on that one it didn't bother me as much, and again they don't go like full 3DS model chibi on that one. It was much more, actually I think in the Gacha game they used basically pixels,
It
smaller.
was very retro, throwback to the
Yeah,
classic ones. Yes.
yeah. So I think that's why I was able to go with that style. Although I guess now to pivot off of your previous comment about Azure Lane, and maybe this should be an episode unto itself, but so fan service, how much does fan service affect your willingness to stick around?
So let's clarify, because the term fan service, some people instantly attribute it to uh, cleavage, the attractive female character, right? That's what a lot of people attribute the word fan service for.
Hmm.
Others, when they hear the word fan service, they more generally incorporate that to where, yes, it can include that, but also fan service in terms of maybe fans of the IP. So if they make, let's say in Disgaea, in that one, fan service maybe could also be considered just making a lot of references or things to the old Disgaea games or throwbacks to different things in terms of whether it be story related elements and like breaking the fourth wall in that regard type stuff. So I'm assuming since you're referencing Azure Lane in my comment on that, you are referencing the prior in terms of
Yes, I'm referring to the prior use of that rather than the former.
sure. So for me, in terms of my gaming tastes, well, I just call it what it is, right? It's not going to deter me. It's not going to turn me away. I'm not going. Having it isn't doesn't mean I'm going to keep playing it. There are plenty of absolutely crummy, cheaply made gotcha games that are specifically and purely that's their loop. Their loop isn't the
Hmm.
gameplay. The loop is the very borderline H scenes type stuff. And so I think I'm trying to remember a couple games. I think there's like Attack on Time was kind of like this, where it's just a lot of hey, buy these packages and a lot of like different screens to go to, but then just some very lewd characters that get progressively more lewd the more you rank them up or whatever have you.
Hmm.
But for a game like Azure Lane, while it is very relatively simplistic gameplay, though apparently there is like a meta and things to do in that game, but what? But for how they do their stuff, it's I view those as two separate categories as compared to a more crummy. Now I will say that there is one game that because we're not touching on sunk cost fallacy, but there is like one idle game that's pure fan servicey and very much a whale pay to win. But I'm just very patient and have no problem playing it for 5 minutes a day. But for me, it's not going to turn me away. I may monitor who I'm in front of when I'm playing it, right? So I may not necessarily play it out in public, or I may maybe like for like Nikkei, I'll play Nikkei out in public. It will
Hmm.
be on mute, but I will play it on my phone out in public if I need to get my dailies done. I'm not scared about that. But as far as fan service goes, can there be over the top? Yes, but at the end of the day, I can look past that and look at the gameplay loop. And if the gameplay loop is not fun and I don't feel accomplished, fan service isn't going to keep the game on my phone. Is a general rule of thumb.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
Uh, but but how about yourself? Does you see it and you just go, nope, don't even want to try it out? Do you try it out and give it a fair shake? What are your thoughts?
My thought is that it's nutmeg. It's a fine spice, but too much of it will kill a person.
Analogy. I like that
Thank you.
analogy.
Yeah, I. That's my feeling on it. I don't want it. We both. I believe I've confessed to you. This is going to be a first for the podcast, but there have been times I have played pure fan service games just to see out of curiosity, like how bad they get. There's a certain, train wreck fascination I've had in the past with one or two of them.
And I think to clarify too, there's a difference between fan servicey games and H games. And
Yeah.
we're not talking about H games.
Correct.
That is a completely different category that are usually horribly monetized and a lot of effort for, I would probably argue, is a little bit reward. But we're
Yeah.
purely talking about fan servicey games, so no nudity, no pure nudity in that regard.
Yeah, they're functionally soft core, to use the that analogy. They tend to be soft core, or I believe the Japanese term is gravure, something like that. I think it's a French term. They are clearly aimed at a 14-year-old audience, but they have an 18-year-old, to enter type setup. Again, not always. They're not full nudity, but yeah, I've gone into a few of them just to see like how scummy they can get and how just over the top they can get. And in that aspect, I'll admit to have played them and that they are like, it wasn't fun. They didn't have good gameplay, but that was certainly not enough to hold my interest again beyond the car wreck. Okay, I want to see how far in a week I can get. Like, how much skin can I
How much
actually
effort are
see?
you putting in, and how bad is the
Yeah.
gameplay to suffer through to even get something remotely tantalized? Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
to get
that's
something
fair.
that you could get off of Google search, safe search. So yeah, definitely not something that is going to keep me on its own. Again, it is a spice though. I don't necessarily mind a little bit of titillation. Again, looking at Honkai, looking at Genshin, I wouldn't say any of those are anywhere near what we're talking about. But I will admit, continual decline, let's put it that way, is a bit saddening to me.
Look, she
Lisa,
clips through the wall. It's just like Mona's hat. Okay, that's definitely why it happened.
yeah, of course.
Uh,
You know,
yeah, I agree. I have also played a few train wrecks as well. I'd probably argue I'm still playing one, but I reference that. I think it's because I have sunk time fallacy. I'll go ahead and throw the game name out there. They actually just released this past week a UR system. So you have your SRs, your SSRs, and now once you get the SSRs to 6 stars, which in and of itself takes 11 copies, it's an idle game. But then you get UR shards upgraded to UR, which is its new form, which has been out in like the Korean server for a while, and it was just brought to the global server this past week. But in the global side, it's called Idle Huntress, and it is absolutely terrible. It's a very much whale game. Your team might doesn't mean anything. So like I have like maybe 49 million might on my team, and I've lost to a team with 25 million might because they have like that one meta character that they just wailed out on. Anyway, that is my one like train wreck gacha game that I play. But with the UR update, it got extremely lewd. Goodness gracious. Like you mentioned, and I'm going to steal that analogy next time. Too much of a good thing. The nutmeg analogy. I really liked that. But to go back to what I was originally before I got side railed by sharing my guilty pleasures, since you shared that you also dabbled, I didn't want to leave you out on a limb. So, like with Genshin characters or Hoyoverse characters, yeah, there's some people have argued like fan servicing. That's why like things have maybe been censored because they were this, that, and the other. I've never looked at a Genshin character like that. To me, their aesthetic is always like one of just, oh, these are beautiful characters. It's for me, like Young was a beautiful character. Zhongli is a beautiful character, but it's never in a way that the very fan servicey games get. It's always more in a refined, elegant, very distinctive style
yeah, it's
from
ballroom jazz
those.
versus
Yes.
streetwalker. A bit crude, perhaps, but
Yeah, a bit. So for Genshin, I mean, I don't even like when people talk about the fan service in Genshin. What are we talking about, man? You think Genshin is fan servicey? This you have ne'er dabbled a pinky toe in the pool that is probably video games in general, but specifically also gacha games. But yeah, that's just my thoughts on that. Like I said, and I like you, because I try a wide variety of gacha games. I have also tried a few car wrecks, but yeah, they usually don't last very long. Some don't even last 15 minutes, right? It's like,
mm.
God, this is abysmal. I'm out.
So I guess any other things or thoughts, motivators that might keep you playing a game past the trial
No,
period?
I think we touched on a lot of good topics as far as what keeps us playing after the honeymoon phase. So yeah, so characters, personality, are we invested in the story? What's that gameplay loop like? Another one just to touch on real quick that can make or break a game is the developers and their communication with the community. Are they providing roadmaps? Are they self-leaking so we can plan our currency out or plan our farming out ahead of time? Or are they listening to us in terms of changes to different gameplay modes? So Brown Dust 2, I think, does a really good job of this. I think Nikkei does as well. I think Star Rail does too. Genshin, okay, could be better. I would say Star Rail maybe does a little better job than Genshin,
Mhm.
just very quickly. But that's another quick factor I did want to touch on very briefly.
Yeah, and I think the when talking about that, you're more focusing on a again communication and feedback more so than say acquiescing to demands or
Yes, I'm not
responding
saying that. I'm not
to.
saying they have to cater and cave to the outrage or the people's demands, but just communicate with us. I think Evers also does a good job with providing a roadmap as well. So just let us know where they're taking the game, what we can look forward in terms of themes, maybe event wise or character wise, and that way we can just in our heads plan out and space that out accordingly. So that's going to take care of it for that bit. Let's talk about the events that have been ongoing within Genshin and Star Rail with the Feline Fortress, and also how we feel about the Honkai drinking drink mixing event, not the drinking event, the drink mixing event. So let's jump into that. So with the events ongoing in Genshin and Star Rail, I want to start with Genshin. We have going on this week the Feline Fortress Vertice. So Steve, I want to get your thoughts on it because my thoughts are very short on this. I tried it out. I got to petting the first cat, and I just said, "This is not good." In these fan servicey games we joked about. Sometimes they have that play style where it's like you have to pet or pat the girl's head or whatever, and she giggles, and her intimacy or whatever raises. This is that, but with a cat. And let me tell you, I hate it in the fan servicey games. I hate it even more here because at least that was a woman. This is a cat that you have to lay out furniture for first. So I'm not about it in either game mode. So I was pretty done with it in 30 seconds. Not for me. But what about you?
Honestly, I tapped out only a little bit further past you. I am a cat owner. I have a cat that I buy shit that it doesn't sit on anyways and toys it doesn't play with anyways.
You get the real life experience. You don't
Yeah,
need to recreate it.
yeah. I'll need to recreate setting up a bunch of crap for the cat to sit there and then sit in the box and look at me like, "What are you doing?" The other thing is that with petting the cat, it's one where it's just you click on the cat somewhere. Like I can tell you right now, grabbing the tail or the paws of the cat isn't going to increase intimacy with it. It's going to piss it off.
It's
Um,
realistic in that regards.
it isn't though. That's the problem.
Everything else is arbitrary, but those
Yeah,
two, that's a mainstay.
yeah. That's one where I at least have had very little success in that particular field with any of the cats that I've met. The only sort of, and again, I'm aware as much as you that the touching of the character is one of those things in fan service games that tends to show up, as well as Fire Emblem, where you have to either pat the head or I think it was blow off steam, like literally blow steam off the character in one of the DS games.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's just one of those mechanics that's meant to make you feel like you're interacting with them, and it doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for me at all. I will probably tap back in over the weekend or next week before it ends, just for the primos. It'll be a grit my teeth and go thing. As a joke, I would find it funny if Diana, I can't remember that character's
Oh, if
name.
she ends up being one of the cats, you have to
Yeah,
pet
if
the
she ends
cat.
up being one of the cats, that one might be a step too far, but I would get a chuckle at it.
Let me know because I'm not picking it
Yeah.
up. I will miss out on those primo gems. That's okay with me. Jumping over to Honkai, though, we've had the drink mixing event going on, and so I wanted to get your thoughts on this one. This one I did enjoy more than the cat petting. I thought it was just fun, and the color presentations and the way once you finish the drink, the camera goes around it and everything. I did enjoy that aspect of it. As far as like the serving of the monsters and getting backstory of the servicing of the monsters, I was just like, let me jump back to figuring out, deducing what drinks and how they're made, and then creating my own drinks. That's what I was really focused on. I could have done without the monster backstories, but I understand that they have to fill events with some sub story to give it reason.
Yeah, at least for me, I would say Considering that I believe this is going to be another one of those eternal events that continues and hangs around for a while, similar to Auramali and the Topaz Pokemon battle event. In that context, I'm a little bit more fine with the story. I do think I ran into the same issue where I was going into it going, okay, I just want to make the drinks and move on, and treat it like to be blunt, a Genshin event where I'm just looking to do the thing and move on with my life, forgetting that it's meant to exist within the overall story of the game. I'm not going to claim that the story that was told was really anything overly special. It was pretty bog standard, but it worked. I didn't feel too bad about it. Yeah, the drink mixing was neat, but overall, it's a solid 6 out of 10.
And you touched on, and I appreciate that Star Rail does this in terms of making the events permanent, right? If you don't do it during the 2 weeks that it's shiny and new, while you miss out on some minor limited rewards, you can still ultimately do the event and ultimately get most of the rewards. Not all, obviously. You miss out on a few things. But out of curiosity, if you finish the event, or at least gotten to the stage where you can pick which 4-star character, who'd you end up going with?
I ended up grabbing Gallagher because I did not have him, and I wanted to be able to get him because that's roughly 4 free standard pulls once I get him leveled up.
That is a fair strategy, and one I neglected because I just saw Gunaifen and I was like, I need another Eidolon on my Gunaifen for my Black Swan team. So I went with Gunaifen, who is now E2. So slowly but surely working my way. But I should heed that advice on the next free 4-star choosing.
I'll be honest, it really did come down between Gallagher and Gweneifen for myself as well. And the only thing that pushed it over the edge was I thought I had Gallagher already. And
Okay.
I double checked and went, oh, I didn't pick him up in like a standard pool or anything like that. So I guess I should grab him.
That's fair, but yeah, but that's good advice. That is true. For characters that you don't have, every other time you ascend them, yeah, you get a standard banner pull. So that is something to consider when you are looking at choosing between 4-stars. If you're given that option, and do I want an Eidolon of one I use in my team, or an Eidolon of one that I don't use in my team all the time, or is niche, or do I want a brand new character? Yeah, for that opportunity, right? In other Gacha news, just very briefly, I know we touched on collaborations last week in our discussion, our main discussion for the episode. And then briefly after that was posted, Epic 7 announced they were doing a collaboration with the Overlord IP. So that should be starting next week. I believe it's on the 18th is when they do their patches. So Wednesday night into Thursday here stateside. So interested to see what they do with that, what characters they make playable. I have my suspicions on who they make playable. They may have already actually announced it and I just missed that aspect, but I have my suspicions. And then today, or I guess by the time we get this edited and put it up, this past week, the event going on with Nikkei is a new cheerleading event called One More Time. They've introduced a new Nikkei called Bay, who I'm still doing some theory crafting and looking into her skill to see how she's going to fit in the meta or what type of team to build around her. She is a rocket launcher user who's more of a tank defensive type. She disperses damage amongst the team and also has the rare talent where she helps heal cover, which is something only a select few Nikkeis do. So I'll be interested to see what the final numbers look like on her.
Is she a
And
burst one? Oh, yeah. Is she a burst 1, 2, or 3? Just a question.
I believe she's going to be a burst 1. However, I forget if she's a 20-second cooldown or a 40-second cooldown, which is important because if she is 40 seconds, then to maintain a normal rotation, you would need another burst 1 in the team. But if she is a 20-second burst 1er, then she is able to be the solo burst 1er. And I also believe she's the Tetra line, which everybody and their mother seems to be a Tetra line when they come out. Goodness gracious. Elysion needs some love, as does Missilis. Also, something else to consider in Nikkei, I think we're coming up on the half anniversary. So just be aware of that in terms of saving up your tickets and your diamonds. Because speculation is a new Pilgrim character will be released for the half anniversary. They're currently doing a popularity contest right now for the Nikkeis that exist, and usually the winner gets a skin that we also get to vote on, like one of 3 themes, which is kind of cool. But anyway, that's my other Gacha news. Steve, I don't know if you have any other news related to games that you're playing, or maybe something I missed.
Nothing off the top of my head. I think that'd be everything.
Awesome. I do want to thank everybody for joining us in this week. Let us know down below what keeps you playing your gacha games. Is it the time sunk, time cost fallacy there? Or maybe it's something that we didn't discuss today in regards to the retention there of keeping you in. Or if you have thoughts on events that are going on in Genshin or Star Realm. Maybe you liked some that we didn't, or you didn't like some that we did. Or maybe you have some comments on some past events that maybe just finished up. If you did like this episode, though, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to the channel. You can email us at brohoyopod@gmail.com with questions, suggestions for the show. We do have a link in our Discord in the description, so be sure to join us over there for more discussion and conversation, content notifications. Feel free to join us next week. We have part 2 of our non-gacha gamer tries series with our special guest returning to the show to share his experience on Honkai Star Rail.